Hello, everyone, and welcome to the session. Most of you probably know me. My name is Devlin. I'm an instructional designer, e-learning developer, and xAPI consultant. And I see the chat's already popping off. We have almost 25 people in here now. This is an interactive session, so contributing to the chat, asking questions, and answering the polls is going to be really important because where we go with this session is going to depend a lot on where you guys want it to go. So I see we have a couple of questions in already, and there are a lot of responses to the polls, but if everyone can take a minute to just use those tabs at the bottom of the screen and ask a question if you have any xAPI questions on your mind, and also answer the polls. There's just a few questions I have for you to get a feel for where everyone is at with xAPI already. I see we have people coming in from North Carolina, Argentina. Hi, Elena. Cool, Cincinnati. So it looks like most of you already know what xAPI is, but there's still a good amount who do not yet. Only a handful of you have actually used xAPI to collect data already. And it's a 50-50 split on people who are interested in the technical side of xAPI and the conceptual side. So we can dive into both today. So let's start things off with what xAPI is. Since it seems like most of you do know what it is, can we get some definitions or explanations in the chat? Let's see. First person to say what xAPI is gets some brownie points. All right, counting down. 22 people know what it is. Oh, I see some people changing from yes to no. What's going on? Statements about learning. Okay, that's a good start. Tracks, sends, and logs experience events. Improvement on SCORM, yes. Big improvement, I would say. So xAPI, well, it stands for the Experience API. It was, before that, it was known as Project Tin Can. So you'll still see it explained as, or referenced as the Tin Can API. Yep, data collection related to experience is good. So xAPI itself is just a specification. So it's like a technical document saying, here's how you're going to collect and retrieve learning data. So, and not specifically learning data, it's about, it is experience data. But but in essence, it's a technical specification. Now, how we use xAPI is where it gets interesting. Like some people are saying, yeah, we use xAPI to collect data about experiences. So I use it a lot to collect data from e-learning courses. But I don't know if we want to go there yet. Let's see. So once we collect that data, does anyone know where that data gets sent? So we're using xAPI to collect data from some learning experience. Where does that data go to? Yeah, you can use it to collect data from an e-learning course, a mobile app, software simulations, games. You can even collect data from like actual machinery, like planes or forklifts or things like that. But it does take some technical know-how to get that data out. And I see we do have some responses coming in. The LRS, that's where data gets sent. LRS stands for Learning Record Store. Crowdcast, the platform we're using, has some cool functionality where you can invite someone up on the screen to like share their video and audio and hop up here with me. Would anyone be so brave as to come up here and explain the difference between a learning record store and a learning management system? I mean, I know some of you might be pretty experienced in here. So does anyone want to give that a go? No pressure. Is there an advantage of using xAPI if you want to use your own dashboards anyways? A question from Victor. Yes, the big advantage of xAPI is that if you're conforming to xAPI, then you're adhering to that, all of those standards lined out in that technical document. So if I create an e-learning course that sends xAPI data, and someone else has a game that's sending out xAPI data, all of that is interoperable, and you can get it into the same learning record store, and and you can see data from all different sorts of experiences, and you don't have to do as much data like wrangling to get it into a format that you can easily compare it to other data with. I'm not seeing any takers on the LRS to LMS comparison, but that's okay. An LMS is the learning management system. I'm guessing almost all of you are familiar with LMSs. But learning record stores, their only purpose really is to hold xAPI data. So whereas a learning management system gates content, you put your content on there, you decide who gets access to it. People have their logins, and you can get some really basic data from those learning experiences using SCORM in most cases, such as who completed the course, who accessed it, that sort of thing. A learning record store, all it does is hold the data, and most of them have some analytics capabilities where you can create visualizations and view that data, create charts, and even share that the visualizations with stakeholders or other people on your team, that sort of thing. Yep, yeah, the LMS is limited to what you're uploading to the LMS. The learning record stores are really cool because say you start with one learning record store like Veracity, LRS, or Watershed, because xAPI, like the whole focus is interoperability, which means, it works with many different tools and platforms. You can completely switch to a new learning record store in a matter of like a minute. I mean, you can literally just type in the credentials for your new learning record store and get all of your statements forwarded over to the new one. And it's like you never even had the first one. And some people use multiple learning record stores in their ecosystems, and you can set up automatic forwarding. So, when learning record store A gets some data, it will automatically send it to learning record store B. So that is the really cool part about xAPI data. I think a good place to go now would, I have some learning record stores pulled up with some xAPI data in them. Would you guys want to see what it looks like on the back end of a learning record store and what it looks like to have that data coming in? There might be a delay between me talking and the chat, but I will take that as a yes, unless anyone else has other questions and wants to take this somewhere else. Oh, here we go. We have a yes. Oh, here we go. Good. Okay. I will share my screen then. Okay. I'll give it a second to buffer. But I have two learning record stores open here. This is Veracity LRS. Their URL is just lrs.io. And this is just a free account I made. I really like Veracity because they are very affordable. They have like a ton of features. So this is what you'll see when you first log in. We'll just hop into this sample LRS that everyone will have when they create an account with Veracity. And it's loaded up with a bunch of data. So to see your statement stream. So again, xAPI data, I guess I should back up because some of you might not even know what xAPI data looks like. xAPI data is sent in the form of xAPI statements. So an xAPI statement, it follows the actor verb object format. So like Devlin opened the LRS. That would be a valid xAPI statement. Or Susie completed xAPI 101. Just actor verb object. That's the most basic format. And you can see how powerful that is because it is just data about the human experience. A valid xAPI statement would be Devlin ate a sandwich, or Devlin went to the park. If it's basically a kindergarten English sentence, and it doesn't even have to be English. If it's just a basic sentence, actor verb object, it can be an xAPI statement. So you see here, this is just a statement stream of all of the xAPI statements received by this learning record store. And you can see right here, actor, verb, object. So Dawn terminated sequence models. We'll scroll down to a different actor. Lori suspended the data scientist's toolbox. So in most learning record stores, you can set up a stream like this where you can see all of your xAPI statements that you've received. Now the thing is that you can add a whole lot more to an xAPI statement than just actor, verb, object. Actor, verb, object is the basic necessary pieces you need, but you can add onto that. I'm not going to say infinitely, but you can add a lot onto that. So when you click on this little downward facing arrow right here, you can see the whole xAPI statement. Now, I'm going to zoom in a bit here, but this is where, it does look, it gets a bit technical. And this is why I think a lot of people shy away from xAPI, because it is, it looks like code. Code can be intimidating if you're not familiar with it. But let's take a look. So ignoring all these curly brackets and quotation marks and colons and all of that, let's see what information we're getting from this. So we know that we have an actor. The actor has this long number associated with this homepage. In all of my tutorials, and what I would recommend doing is identifying your actor by their email address. You can also identify them by their account. Like another example here would be homepage would be twitter.com and the name would be your Twitter handle. So you can identify people by accounts. This just looks confusing because it's some weird account that we wouldn't be familiar with. For example, I'll log into Watershed over here, which is another popular learning record store. We'll go to data search and we can see this data stream. This data stream is from kind of a project I've been working on. It's like an xAPI challenges app, and it kind of walks you through some more technical tutorials about how to use xAPI with Articulate Storyline to send custom statements out. And this is some of the data we've been getting. So I can actually show you. We'll generate some data in real time here. So we'll say our email address is xapi101@devlintech.com. Okay, so we just started this course, and here's a technical question. Click on this downward facing arrow and see the xAPI statement. So now, once again, we see that word. We have an actor. Their name is just user, because as you saw, I didn't put in a name. I just put in an email address. But we also have this email address, mail to xapi101@devlintech.com. So this is just a quiz I made in Storyline on a completely different domain. And just like that, instantly, you can get this data coming in. And we can see, this is in response to question 1. It's a question in the write an xAPI statement quiz. And so far, my score is 1 out of 5 because I'm only on that first question. And on top of that, I can even see what my response was. So, I can see here, okay, I clicked this option. Name is Devlin. And I can see how long it took me to arrive at that answer. So again, there's more coded stuff in here, but it's basically saying this took you 10 seconds. I was on that slide for 10 seconds before sending that response. If this is your first time seeing xAPI statements in this format, it might be a bit intimidating because it is so codey looking. But I have a live session at the same time next week, and we're going to look at how you can write an xAPI statement from scratch. And we'll go through what these curly brackets mean, what a JSON object is, which is basically what this xAPI statement is. And we'll kind of build it from the ground up. So this looks confusing now. By the end of that session next week, you'll be able to read this like it's nothing. So that I did post that session. If any, I'll mention it again at the end. But let me pull one more thing up. Okay. So I do have these 10 tutorials on how to use xAPI with Articulate Storyline. And using Crowdcast in these live sessions, we're just going to go through them one by one. So like I said, next week, we're going to go through how to write an xAPI statement from scratch, and we'll look at what all of this means, all of this, all of that code stuff. And we're going to go into how to get a name and an email from a Storyline course, how to actually send your first xAPI statement like you just witnessed this one getting sent in. And then we're going to go all the way to actually building leaderboards, querying the LRS, measuring duration to see how much time someone spent on a slide, and a whole lot more. So I'm going to hop back over to Crowdcast. I haven't been looking at the chat this whole time. So yeah, let's see what questions we have. Can you get graphs from result in an xAPI statement? Yeah, so with Veracity particularly, they have really open access to their xAPI, to their API, so you can build graphs and visualizations based on any element of an xAPI statement. For those of you who don't know, the result object in an xAPI statement is where, for example, that's where we saw what response I selected to that question. So you can see what users responded to questions with using the result object. And if you have open text questions, like, any kind of open text question, even like, how did you like this course? You could have that in a Storyline course, and the user can type in whatever they want. And when they click submit or send, you can collect their actual response in the xAPI statement using that result object. When you add on to an xAPI statement, it's still in that format. So you have the actor, the verb, and the object, and each of those, they're objects themselves. They can hold information. So the actor object obviously holds information about who it is that's performing the action. The verb object it'll have like a unique identifier, which is usually, it looks like a URL, and then just the plain language version of it. So Devlin ran, and the object could be like a marathon. Now you can add on addition. So that's just actor, verb, object. We were just talking about result, which would be a separate object. And there was actually a question about this. There's also a context object. So I can say there, oh yeah, Devlin answered. We can see Devlin answered this question in this quiz, or Devlin answered this question. Using the context object, you can say this question is actually a child of this quiz. So you can associate objects with other objects using context. Again, this is probably getting pretty technical, but yeah, not only can you associate it with like a parent. So, okay, this question is associated with this quiz. You can also say this quiz is associated with this entire learning program that all these other quizzes and questions and courses are associated with. So yeah, you can use, context is really good. Once you start getting a lot of different statements from a lot of different sources, it helps you keep track of how everything is related. And when it comes time to analyze that data, you can say, okay, I only want to see statements associated with this certification program, or on a smaller level, only the statements associated with this course or with this quiz. And you can get increasingly granular with the data you want to look at and analyze. And extensions, that's another thing you can add to xAPI statements. Using extensions, you can add whatever data you want, really. So you can add photos, videos, PDF files, and you would add those in the form of links. So for example, a user would submit a photo, it would get uploaded to a server, and a link would get generated, and then you would include that link in the xAPI statement. And when it comes time to work with that data, you could actually say, okay, this is an image, load this image in this spot of the xAPI statement when I'm looking at that data. So yeah, xAPI statements are really versatile. They can hold pretty much any data you can imagine. And yeah, you can add a lot of contextual information as well. So, and with the result, you can hold the score information. You can say whether or not they passed the quiz or the course. And yeah, and you can actually get their responses to questions. So the xAPI Challenges app, that's still in pilot. So I have a group of about 15 people going through it right now. They're going through the tutorials, and there's a quiz and like a statement sending challenge associated with each of my tutorials. So for some of them, like the write an xAPI statement quiz, all you've got to do is, all you have to do is answer the quiz. But on some, like where the tutorial teaches you how to send an xAPI statement, like we just saw us do when I was sharing my screen, the app requires you to send a statement to My Learning Record Store. And then on the back end, it automatically updates and say, okay, yes, you sent the statement. I'm going to give you credit for it in the app. So it's a cool way to kind of measure your progress, challenge yourself as you go, and just kind of get some recognition because there's like an in-app leaderboard. So it's going to be cool. The best way to find out about it is to just hop on my mailing list. I think everyone who signed up here will get an email asking you if you want to sign up to the mailing list. And as soon as that app is ready with all 10 of the challenges, I'm going to announce it there first. So using xAPI with a Moodle course or Google Classroom. You can use xAPI wherever you can execute JavaScript. So I know Moodle, I haven't done a ton of work with Moodle, but I know that it's really, I know that you can do a lot of custom development with Moodle and really build it out how you want. So I'm sure there's a way to execute JavaScript from a Moodle course. In my tutorials, I talk about what JavaScript you'll use in Storyline. If you know Moodle well and you know where to execute that JavaScript, you can adapt it really easily because the xAPI code is going to be the same whether you're using Storyline, Captivate, Moodle, just a plain HTML5 web page. So yeah, it's just a matter of figuring out where you can execute JavaScript within Moodle and then just writing that function how you want it, putting in your LRS credentials and firing it off whenever the user triggers that action in Moodle. So I hope that helps. I don't have an exact technical how-to for that, but I'm sure it's possible. Okay, I'm going to add this one as a question. So this is a great question. How can xAPI help with return on investment with e-learning projects? So, I mean, obviously proving return on investment is a very big undertaking in and of itself. And we can do a series of these crowdcasts on that topic alone. But the really cool part about xAPI, we've been talking about it so far. We've been talking about how you can use xAPI to collect learning data. So you have a quiz or you have a simulation or a game, whatever it is. But the really cool piece is that you can also use xAPI to collect performance data. And most enterprise software that you'll be using on the job, there's a way that you'll be able to use their API or use an integration to get the data out of that system and get it into a learning record store. So as you can imagine, let's just use a simple example. Say we're a call center employee and our job is to resolve issues for our customers. So at the end of each call, the customer says, yes, they resolved our issue or no, they didn't. And that's a metric that the call center employee would be evaluated on. So, by integrating with that enterprise software that's measuring those resolutions, we could send those as xAPI statements. So if I call in, my issue is resolved, I click yes, we could fire off an xAPI statement saying this agent resolved this issue for this customer or this person. Now, so we know how many cases these people are actually resolving and helping with. At the same time, we would look at their learning data. So say we had a call center or an issue resolution 101 course on our learning management or something. And we're sending xAPI statements about everything the user does in that course. So we can see, oh, wow, they're performing really well on this simulation, or wow, they spent a lot of time on this infographic that we included in the course. And that's just on a granular level. So now say we look at, okay, these 100 agents have a really high issue resolution rate. Say that all of them are doing like 90% or above issue resolution rate. We would compare that to their learning data, and maybe we find things like, wow, a vast majority of these high performers, they all spent a long time on this infographic. So now we can see this infographic is doing a lot to help people perform well on this call. Again, correlation doesn't equal causation, but correlation, it can be insightful. You can take that a step further and say, okay, well, it seems like this this infographic is really helping people. So let's run a test. Maybe on a group of new hires, 10 of them, we give the infographic to them and we tell them, study this, this is really helpful. And the other 10, we don't provide the infographic and we just have them go through the rest of the training content as normal. After we do that, we would look at that performance data as it comes in and see, how are these 10 people performing compared to these 10 people? And maybe we would want to have a bigger sample size in each. It depends. But if you see then that the group A is resolving way more issues than group B, then you can say with a potentially a good amount of certainty that this infographic is really driving a lot of return on investment because it's really impacting one of these key metrics we have at our call center. So I hope that answers your question. I know that was a lot, but the short of it is xAPI is really good for proving ROI when you can compare that learning data to that performance data, and you can show that this is either causing the performance data to be better or it's highly correlated with the better performance. Okay, another question, let's see. So here's a question. Do learning experience platforms use xAPI for external sources? Open source like YouTube, TED Talks, etc. So for those of you who don't know, a learning experience platform is kind of like that. It's marketed as like the evolution of the learning management system. So whereas learning management systems, you upload your SCORM packages to them and you upload your content to the platform and people have access to only the content that you uploaded. With learning experience platforms, they really bring data to the forefront and they really buy into this model that learning happens outside of the LMS. Learning can happen wherever, whenever. It really focuses on just-in-time support. It uses data to look at, not only what you as the employee or the learner are experiencing, but also what all of your peers are experiencing and what learning they're spending time with. And based on all of that data, they can make custom recommendations and say, oh yeah, we think this learning product will be, we think you should look at this next based on all of this data we have, that sort of thing. So how these learning experiences use xAPI to track different things is probably going to vary depending on which learning experience platform you're looking at. I'll tell you though, that to track activity on YouTube or TED Talk or something like that, they're going to need some way to get that information. So for example, they might show you a link to a YouTube video. If you click that link and in a new window, it just brings you to youtube.com. They'll be able to track that you clicked that link, but they won't necessarily know how you're interacting with that YouTube video. On the other hand, if they embed that YouTube video on their own webpage, on their domain, they might be able to use some JavaScript to access how you're interacting with that YouTube video, and they can send xAPI statements accordingly. Another way they might do it is they might add some kind of add-on on your, add an add-on to Chrome, and that will kind of track which pages you're visiting, and that it might feed that back into the learning record store. I think specific implementations of that will obviously vary, but YouTube and TED Talks on their own, they don't send out xAPI data. So it's up to developers to figure out how they're going to present those videos and stuff on their platforms and how they're going to get that data if they're getting it at all. Hope that answers your question. Cool, what else do we have here? How do you often use xAPI? Wait, let me post this as a question for people who are watching the replay. Okay, how do you often use xAPI to improve the courses companies offer? So this is another really good question. And this is one of my favorite things to do with xAPI because I do so much work with e-learning. xAPI data, I think the simplest way to put it is that xAPI data serves as a spotlight for things that are going wrong in your course. Now, I guess it sounds a little dismal, but it really is a spotlight for any user experience issues. So here's an example. Here are a couple of examples, actually. I was working with a client on these e-learning courses, and we were sending out some prototypes to a big group of people in the target audience. So I rigged it all up with xAPI, and we used action mapping to create the course. So it's really scenario based. It's like you're put into this situation and you have to make these tough decisions that people would have to make on the job. Now, this isn't like a typical e-learning course where you're just putting out content, click here to access all of the content. Instead, the content was hidden behind a little like learn more button. So it was up to the person to decide, okay, do I know the answer to this and I'm just going to select the right answer right away, or am I not sure and I want to access this supporting content and dive into it and see if I can figure out the right answer with that help. So I used xAPI triggers to see how people were interacting with that supporting content. Were they opening it at all? Were they opening it before answering the question? How long did they spend on it? And the content that would pop up was interactive. So it was also like, which pieces of that content were they viewing? So we sent it out to our target audience. A ton of data came in. And we found that like 95% of the people, like a vast majority of them, one, were answering the questions incorrectly on the first try, and coincidentally, were not accessing that supporting content. So we saw there, okay, these people, they might not be as familiar with this content as we would have hoped, so they don't really have background knowledge. And on top of that, they're not accessing the supporting content. So that's like the quantitative data. That's the raw data that xAPI is sending us. So we combine that with the qualitative data where we ask people in the target audience what was happening here. Why weren't you accessing the supporting content if you weren't so sure of what the right answer was? And the common response was that learn more button they didn't know that was going to give them more content. So it showed us a big oversight in our design approach where we thought, oh yeah, learn more. Yeah, you're going to learn more about the content that you need to answer this question. Whereas instead, people just either overlooked it or they thought that it was like learn more about how to interact with the course or how to navigate the course. So with that information, we brought a lot more attention to the button. We redesigned it a little bit to be closer to those answer choices and make it look more, look like it's more related to actually answering the question. And on that very first question, we actually called attention to it and required them to open it just that one time so they knew what kind of information was hiding beneath those buttons. And after that, using that xAPI data, we could see a big improvement in how many people were actually, not one, accessing the information, and two, everyone who was accessing that information first was answering the question correctly after viewing it. So again, that's a long example, but there are a lot of other ways you can use it too. Say you have an hour-long e-learning course or something like that. You can fire off an xAPI statement whenever someone leaves that course. And along with that statement, you can include exactly which slide they were on when they left the course. So if you're looking at your data and you see that 70% of the people who left your course before getting to the end, if you see that they're all leaving on one slide, then there's something going on that one slide. So you might go to that slide and it's way too much text, or it's just a really boring page that they look at it and their eyes glaze over and they're like, I'm not doing this. Or it might be a user experience issue where if they take some actions earlier in the course, it causes some kind of glitch or issue where they can't continue from this new slide. And again, that's xAPI data is really good for troubleshooting bugs and issues like that. Because if you add all of those triggers like you would want to, you can see exactly which actions someone took leading up to the issue. So when it comes to troubleshooting, you can just look at your programming and say, oh yeah, I messed up a trigger here, or there's some programming error that I can just fix like that because now I know exactly where to look because I can see where things went wrong. And as you can imagine, that's a lot more efficient than having to, one, put the impetus on your audience to give you the information with a little survey or something that maybe 5 or 10% of them will actually fill out. And then two, for people who have reviewed feedback, they can't tell you exactly what the issue is as clearly as this automatic data can. They might say, oh yeah, earlier in the course, there was an issue. I got stuck on a slide. And then it's up to you to do more digging or do more testing to figure out which slide they got stuck on, why they got stuck, which actions they took that led them to getting stuck. And And with xAPI, you can also collect information about which browser the user and operating system someone is accessing the course from. So that obviously helps a ton with troubleshooting as well and resolving potential issues. So I hope that answered your question, Victor. I know that was a lot. I could list examples like that all day, but let's see what else we can get through here. So let's see this question from Nicole. We have a few Rise courses that are exported to web, and we made them as their own websites outside of the LMS. Could xAPI be implemented there? 1,000% yes. xAPI does not. Oh, sorry. I forgot to put that I was answering that question so that people who are watching the replay, they can skip right to it. But yeah, you can definitely use xAPI to collect data about how people are interacting with Rise courses outside of an LMS. xAPI does not rely on an LMS at all. You can add xAPI to a SCORM package or to a web page or to a tin can package, or in this case, even an HTML5 package. When you're adding the custom code, which is what we're going to get into, which was what I get into in these tutorials and what we'll get into over the next 10 weeks in these live sessions, you can add that code anywhere that you can add a JavaScript, and you can send xAPI data. The challenge with the Rise courses, there are a few challenges with it. So one, it is going to require some coding know-how so that you can look at how the web page is changing when people are interacting with the course. Rise isn't like Storyline where you can just add and execute JavaScript trigger when someone interacts with it in a certain way. And there are some videos up on YouTube about how to do this, and I'll make tutorials about how to send xAPI statements from Rise in the future. But that's one challenge. And the other challenge is figuring out who your learner is. So a big value proposition of xAPI is that you can tie all of these actions and interactions to a single user. So Devlin, the one who's answering these questions in this quiz, is the same Devlin who's resolving these problems for my customers at this call center or whatever it is. So you can tie all of this different learning and performance data to one person. If you're just putting your course up on the open web, you're not going to be able to do that unless you get an email address from them somehow. Now, what you can do, which is a step up from Google Analytics, because with Google Analytics you can track raw data easily, but it's just raw numbers. You're not going to be able to tie it to one person. You'll just say, oh, this web page had 1,000 hits or 1,000 people answered these questions. With xAPI, you can generate like a random number. So like an 8-digit number, and you can just create like a fake email address for them. So like user 2799821 at example.com or whatever you want to call it, or at yourdomainname.com. And whenever someone hits that Rise course, you can assign that number to them, and you can cache that number. So what that means is you can still tie the data to this one user's actions without knowing what their actual email address is. Because what that means is when they close this Rise course, or maybe they come back to a different Rise course on your domain a week later, that number will still be saved, and you can still tie their actions to that user. You just won't know who that user is or what their email address is and that sort of thing. But you'll still know that it's the same person who was there a week ago, or the same person who passed this course or whatever it is. So yeah, I hope that answers your question. It does take some custom code to do it, but it's 100% possible. All right, a question from Melina. Once you have all of the data in the Learning Record Store, can you download it specifying, for example, date? Do you download it in Excel? This is a great question because 100% you can do that. Every LRS I've ever seen has export options, so you can download it to a CSV, you can open it up in Excel, and you can do all of your own analytics. And Watershed, for example, the second LRS that I showed you, that's a free plan too. If you want to access all of their analytics features, you have to pay something like $4,000 a month. So that's obviously out of the budget for most people who are just getting started with xAPI. But you can use it to collect all of your xAPI information. And if you are good with Excel, or if you know someone who's good with Excel, you can just download that sheet, send it off to the Excel power user, and you can do all sorts of custom analysis and analytics on that data. And every time a statement gets sent, it has a timestamp, so you'll know when that statement was generated. And so you can specify it by time, date, and then of course actor, verb, object. You can do correlations and comparisons in Excel. So again, it takes some Excel know-how, but you can definitely use that as your tool of choice when it comes to analyzing this data. And you can even use integrations. So I don't know if you all are familiar with it, but Zapier. So this tool called Zapier is a godsend when it comes to working with data between different tools. So it really serves as like the glue between different tools and getting data from one tool to another. Now, the really cool thing about Watershed, and what I commend them for, is that Watershed has a Zapier integration. And what that means is whenever Watershed receives an xAPI statement, you can set up an integration so that as soon as Watershed gets that statement, it will get forwarded to a Google Sheet, for example, or to your email marketing software, or the other way around. That's how you would make it so that whenever someone does an action in Salesforce or something, you can automatically get it sent into Watershed and have an xAPI statement generated from it. Now, there are, of course, better ways to do that, like using code and using the APIs that these enterprise tools have. But if you're not super tech savvy and you want to do it on your own, Zapier is a no-code tool, and you can even use that to send xAPI statements without writing a line of code. The only thing that requires is that the tool that you want to send an xAPI statement from has a Zapier integration. And Zapier does get pricey once you start needing to send thousands and thousands of statements per month. So that's not a super long-term option unless you have a decent budget and it's worth it to you. But Zapier is a really good tool for integrations and for generating xAPI statements without code. I think that answers that question. Let's see. We have another question from Victor. Keep these coming, Victor. Good questions so far. Did you have any problems with clients integrating inside Storyline in terms of technical knowledge? For example, I faced order or JavaScript triggers and z-index of content. Okay, getting complex there. If so, how did you go about this? So how I'm understanding this question is, since xAPI is so technical, have I ever had any issues with clients going through, dealing with those technical pieces? So here's a really good example of what I did for one client. We wanted to use xAPI. We wanted to track all of this. We wanted to track specific data about how people are interacting with these articulate Storyline courses. And on top of that, this client had to create like 50 courses, way too much for one person to handle. So he had a team of instructional designers, most of whom had never heard of xAPI. So what I would do, or what I did, is I went in and I wrote a big JavaScript file that had all of the functions we needed to send the data to the learning record store that I set up for the client. So the client didn't have to deal with any of that JavaScript. I set it up for him. And from there, I created a Google Sheet and each row was like associated with a different xAPI trigger. So for example, we want to know when someone viewed a resource. So we would have a row for that viewed verb. And then we would have another row for played, because we would want to know when they played a video. And another row for selected, because we would want to know when they selected a certain option. And so on and so forth for answered and exited the course and lost focus on the course. So we had like a series of 10 of those verbs, 10 of these statements that we were tracking. And how I set it up, I used some Google Sheets or Excel magic so that the user would just have to answer the questions in 3 different columns. So they'd have to say, what is the object that the user is viewing? Or what is the selection that the user is selecting? And they would put in a few of those things just in plain English. And then in the final column, I would just generate, using Google Sheets, automatically generate the JavaScript function that they would just copy and paste into Storyline in an execute JavaScript trigger. And the last piece of that was I had some documentation that said that said for the instructional designers exactly, it was an introduction to what xAPI is. It was an introduction to the different things that we would be tracking. And then it was instructions on how to use that Google Sheet, and then how to just add the file that I created to the published storyline output file. So, I mean, the reason for this is because you could come in as an instructional designer who knows nothing about xAPI, and within an hour, just following these simple instructions and using this JavaScript generator that I created, within an hour, they could be sending custom xAPI statements without writing any code themselves. It's just copy and pasting. So that's what I try to do for my clients, because I understand not everyone has the time or the desire to really dive into the technical side of it and learn how to send it themselves. If you are at all interested in that, then, highly recommend following along, because I am going to walk through how to do it week by week, and you'll be a pro by the end of it if you commit. And it's completely free, so yeah. Long story short, I don't get my client bogged down in the technical details. I explain the conceptual things. With them, I work out what we want to track and why, and how it will be valuable. And then I handle the technical stuff on my own on the back end. I show them how to use the learning record store, because obviously that will be important for viewing the data and viewing visualizations. But I don't Victor. But yeah, I don't dive into the technical details unless they're curious. So, okay. Let's see, we have some more questions here. Which e-learning or authoring tools have the most robust plug-and-play xAPI functionality? So this is a good question too. I think I should have mentioned this in the beginning. The easiest way to start sending xAPI statements is to just publish from your e-learning authoring tool as an xAPI or tin can package. And again, tin can and xAPI, they're the same thing. Tin can is what it used to be known as, but it still has that language in authoring tools. So in different authoring tools, when you publish the xAPI, they'll already have all these this data that it automatically generates. So in most cases, you have no control over which data gets sent. Like an articulate storyline, for example, instead of dealing with all of this custom code and adding JavaScript and all of that, you can just publish it as xAPI, upload it to an xAPI conformant learning management system, and it will automatically start sending out a ton of data. It will tell you every time a user experiences a slide. So whenever I go to a new slide, whatever I title that slide in storyline, say I call it introduction slide, as soon as I hit that slide, storyline will send a statement, Devlin experienced introduction slide. If you have 100 slides in your course, you're going to get 100 xAPI statements about how these people experienced each of your slides. So that's going to be a lot of data coming really quickly. Storyline will also give some it will give some interaction data. So if you use like the built-in questions, you can see what users' responses are. Likewise with the quiz, it will tell you if the user passed or failed the quiz, and it will tell you when the user completes the course. And that's about it with Storyline. Captivate, very similar. You can't customize this output at all. You can't change which verbs they use, but you will get slightly more information than you would get with SCORM, because SCORM isn't telling you exactly which slides the user is viewing. Again, if you require that they view all of them to mark the course as complete, then you kind of know, okay, they viewed all of the slides. Now, the one tool that has the best out-of-the-box functionality, because it actually gives you control over what data will be included in that xAPI statement and when you send that xAPI statement, is Domino. So I think it's Domino 1 or Domino Flow. They have a tool. They have built into their authoring tool. You can just select send an xAPI statement when the user clicks this button or when the user reaches this point in the course. And then you can pick, okay, here's the verb I want to use, here's what the object is called, et cetera, et cetera. And that is the direction we need to go. I mean, I'm hoping that this skill set I have will be like irrelevant. I actually considered not even doing these tutorials like years back, because I'm like, oh, the authoring tools are going to catch up. And they'll just, in Storyline, you'll just be able to say, oh, send an xAPI statement, type in the verb you want, type in the object you want, include the other data. Like, that's what we need. That's what I would have that's what I would hope that we would have soon. But I thought that 2 years ago, and here we still are with not much progress. So for now, it does come down to adding the custom code if you want to send custom statements. Domino is good for sending, Domino has the best out-of-the-box functionality, and hopefully they will all get better out-of-the-box functionality in the near future, but I wouldn't count on it. Hope that answers that question. Okay, another question from Gib. If you have an e-learning course with xAPI and publish it to an LMS that doesn't support xAPI, will an LRS still capture the data, or will the xAPI events be stuck or lost? This is another great question. And this is one that might be counterintuitive. So if your learning management system can support xAPI packages, what that means is that you can publish from Storyline or Domino or whatever. You can publish an xAPI package, upload it, and the LMS will send that data to your learning record store automatically, and it can handle these xAPI packages. That's good. If your learning management system does not handle xAPI packages, that doesn't mean that you can't send custom xAPI statements from whatever you're uploading to your learning management system. So like I said earlier, you can send xAPI data from a SCORM course, and it doesn't matter if your learning management system supports xAPI packages, because all you're uploading a SCORM package, and it knows how to deal with that. So when you do that, the learning management system will get all the data coming out of your SCORM course, like whatever the user's score is and whether or not they completed it. But at the same time, by adding that custom code and sending those custom statements, you can send all of that data out to your learning record store without it interfering with the learning management system or the SCORM reporting at all. So yeah, don't be discouraged if your LMS doesn't support xAPI, because it's not necessary. We would be sending those statements with custom code, and yeah. So hopefully that is encouraging. But yeah, if you just want to use the default out-of-the-box xAPI packages, that's not an option if your LMS doesn't support xAPI. All right, another question. Is it possible to collect data for people with multiple accounts and report as per the user? So my understanding of this question is, say a user has 10 different accounts or 5 different accounts. Is there a way to associate this with one user? The answer is yes. You can use, I believe it's the agent profile. And you can say, okay, these are all of the different accounts associated with this user. And then when it comes time to analyze things, you can say, okay, show me all of the xAPI statements from this user, and it will look at the data generated from all of their accounts. I haven't done a ton of work with the agent profile, but I know that it's possible based on just research. So it is possible, yes. Okay, here's a good question from Andrew Light. Can you touch on profiles a bit and maybe show what you can to help illustrate? Okay, so for those of you who don't know, so xAPI, like you've probably gathered, is very flexible. So you can say Devlin turned on a light, or Devlin ate a sandwich, or Devlin passed xAPI 101. All of that you can send to a learning record store, and it's not going to get turned away as long as it's in the right format. An xAPI profile, and before this they were known as recipes, it basically says, here's how we're going to use xAPI for this specific use case. So for example, there's an xAPI video profile, and it tells you, here's which xAPI verbs we're going to use, and here's when we're going to use them. And the benefit of doing this, pulling things back together, coming full circle, is interoperability. So if I set some things up for one of my clients with videos, and I'm saying, oh yeah, we're going to say this is when the user played the video. When they start it, we're going to send a statement saying the user played this xAPI 101 video. Another person can set it up in their company, or even another developer at the same company can set up xAPI and say, okay, this user started this video. So we're going to send an xAPI statement saying that they started the video. I'm over here saying they played the video. So when it comes time to analyze that data, it's obviously a lot messy. It won't be so easy as to just say, oh, show me all the times when the user played the video, because then I might only be getting half of the statements, or worse, 10% of them. So profiles are really important when it comes to interoperability. If you're just doing some prototypes and you just want to get some data and learn more about how people are interacting with this one prototype, and that data is not going to go anywhere else, you don't need to use a profile. But if you want to bring data from multiple different sources into the same into the same ecosystem, and you're going to be analyzing data from all of these different sources, you want to make sure that your verb choices and and how you're using those verbs are very clearly outlined and defined, and that's what profiles are for. Profiles themselves, like if you're reading the profile, like, okay, yeah, so we have a video profile, let's go read it. It's really technical. So it's like looking at an xAPI statement. It's formatted in a very specific way. It uses very specific terminology. I haven't created profiles like that myself. So that is something I need to dive into more. I know Yet Analytics, it's another learning record store company. It seems like they do a lot of work with building custom profiles for organizations. Because I gave the video profile as an example. There are also some industry-specific ones, like a cybersecurity profile. So it says what verbs we're going to use when we're dealing with cybersecurity issues. And then there are organization-specific profiles. So I've built like faux profiles for companies because I do very clearly document how we're going to use those verbs and why we're using those verbs. But if, for example, another company who had a bunch of xAPI data acquired this company, and then they were trying to work with all of this company's xAPI data, it's going to take some work to like wrangle that data and get it in the same format. So the benefit of using an industry-wide profile is that there wouldn't be any hiccups when you're switching that data between companies. One last thing to touch on, which I think is really important when you're talking about xAPI, it's what I would say is the most important profile. It's called CMI5. CMI5 is an xAPI profile that describes how a learning management system and an e-learning course are going to communicate with each other. I don't think we don't have time to get into it now, but that's what's going to replace SCORM. So people were saying years ago, xAPI is going to replace SCORM, and it is, but it was too flexible to really do that in a meaningful way. Now that CMI5 is much more further along, it's officially developed. Storyline recently released, published as CMI5. Unfortunately, a lot of learning management systems aren't on board with it yet, and they haven't adopted it. But the Department of Defense is in like the final stages of approving that adoption. And once that is the case, we would expect the industry to hop on board pretty rapidly, because that is exactly what happened with SCORM. So CMI5 definitely something to look into, or there's some good articles about it I can share. Check that out if you're interested about the future of xAPI and what's going to really kick up adoption industry-wide, because that's going to be the thing. And that is a profile. So I hope that helps a bit. So we are out of time and we are out of questions. That worked out. That timing was really good. Thank you everyone for staying till the end, for contributing. Had some really good questions here. And if you do feel like braving the challenge of diving into the technical pieces, I hope to see you next week. I'm imagining it's going to be a much smaller group, but that's okay. Even if 5 of us are there, you're going to get a ton of value out of it. I already have that session on my profile, so you can sign up for it now and you'll get notified next week. Yeah, no problem, everyone. I mean, xAPI is some of my favorite stuff to talk about. So yeah, and I'm glad we had a turnout. I was a little, just nervous about hosting this. This is like the first live stream I've hosted on my own. So sorry if it was a little awkward at times. Still getting the hang of it. You can tell. Thank you. Good stuff. Oh no, you can. Oh, maybe you said you could tell that I like xAPI. That's nice. That's fair. Thanks, guys. So I'm going to go ahead and end this. If you want to get a head start on the coding stuff, I have really in-depth tutorials on my website. They've been there for a while. Sign up for my mailing list if you want to get updated about stuff. You'll get you probably already got an email about it. And that is a wrap. I'll see some of you next week, and the rest of you I'll see on LinkedIn. So bye-bye, everyone. Thank you again.